When I found out I was pregnant, it wasn't the way movies show it. There was no soft music playing in the background, no joyful tears, no nervous laughter about the future. It was quiet, just me in a small bathroom staring at two pink lines that felt like both a blessing and a bomb. I pressed my hand over my stomach and whispered, "We're gonna be okay," not knowing how many times I'd have to repeat that sentence to keep myself from breaking. I told my parents 2 days later. I shouldn't have been nervous. I thought love was unconditional. I thought family meant something that didn't dissolve when life got complicated. I remember my mom sitting at the table, her coffee steaming in front of her, eyes scanning my face like she was trying to find a punchline. My dad didn't say much at all. He just stared at me the way people stare at broken things, curious about how it happened but unwilling to fix it. When the words finally came out of my mouth, they hung in the air like smoke. "I'm pregnant." Silence followed, heavy and sharp. My mom set her mug down so slowly it scared me more than if she'd shouted. My dad got up, walked out of the kitchen, and didn't come back for an hour. When he didn't look at me. He looked past me, through me, like I'd become a stranger overnight. Their disappointment was loud even when they said nothing. My mom's voice eventually came, trembling but hard. "You've ruined your life, Amanda. You've thrown everything away for a mistake." I wanted to tell her it wasn't a mistake, that it was love, that it was life growing inside me. But the words got stuck because deep down I realized she wasn't talking about my life. She was talking about hers. The version of motherhood that was all about control and appearances. The weeks that followed were colder than any winter I've ever known. My phone stopped buzzing with her texts. My dad avoided me in our own house, leaving early and coming home late. When I hit 5 months, my belly started to show, and that's when it happened. They called me into the living room, both sitting there like they were about to deliver a verdict. My mom said it first, like it was rehearsed. "We can't support this, you need to leave." It's strange how a few words can split your life into 2 parts before and after. I remember standing there, feeling the air leave my lungs. "Leave," I whispered. My dad looked away. My mom folded her arms. "You made your choices, Amanda, you'll have to live with them." That night I packed what I could, the rest didn't matter. Clothes, a few photos, a blanket I'd had since childhood. I sat on my bed one last time, the same bed I'd cried on as a little girl, the same room that held my teenage dreams. Now it just held silence. I pressed my hand against my stomach and whispered again, "We're gonna be okay." My baby kicked for the first time that night, and I took it as a sign that I wasn't completely alone. For weeks, I slept on a friend's couch. Every day felt like a blur of exhaustion and nausea and fear. I watched other people live their ordinary lives while mine had been reduced to survival mode. But something inside me kept saying, "Don't break. Not now." When help came, it wasn't in the way I expected. I didn't even know what to do with it at first. It came quietly, gently, without judgment. They didn't ask questions, didn't treat me like I was damaged. They just saw me. They saw the exhaustion in my eyes, the trembling in my hands, the way I still tried to smile even when everything had been taken from me. They made sure I had a place to stay. Not just a roof, a home. Warm meals, soft sheets, peace. They treated me with a kind of kindness I wasn't used to. The kind that didn't demand explanations. The kind that didn't keep score. For the first time in months, I slept without fear. It felt unnatural to be cared for like that. I'd been conditioned to think love had to be earned, that comfort came with strings attached. But there were no strings. There was just this quiet, steady presence reminding me that I was safe, that I mattered, that I wasn't ruined. Sometimes I'd sit by the window, watching the light hit the glass, and think about how everything had changed. How the people who gave me life could abandon me so easily, and how complete strangers could give me back my dignity without asking for anything in return. I used to think blood was thicker than water, but I learned something different. Love is thicker than pride. Compassion is deeper than genetics. There were days I still cried, especially at night. Pregnancy is hard enough when you have support, but doing it alone while mourning parents who were still alive, it broke me in ways I can't describe. I missed my mom's voice even though it hurt me. I missed the illusion of family, the safety I thought I had. But every time the grief tried to drown me, I felt that little kick inside my belly reminding me I had something worth fighting for. I started going to doctor appointments again. They made sure I got there. They'd send a car, pack snacks for me, make sure I had everything. I remember one of them putting her hand on mine after an appointment and saying, "You're stronger than you think, Amanda." No one had said those words to me before. As my belly grew, so did my sense of self. I began to see my worth through the eyes of people who didn't need to love me, but chose to. They didn't try to fix my broken pieces, they gave me space to heal them myself. That's something my parents never understood. Love isn't control. Love isn't judgment. Love is sitting beside someone in their darkest moment and saying, "You're not alone." I spent my last trimester surrounded by quiet luxury I didn't ask for but was deeply grateful for. It wasn't about the money, it was about the peace it provided. The kind of peace that comes when your body and soul finally exhale after months of holding tension. There was a nurse who stayed with me through most nights, monitoring, comforting, listening. Sometimes we'd talk about motherhood, fear, forgiveness. She told me, the world will try to make you feel small, but your child will grow up seeing you as the bravest person alive. That thought became my anchor. When I went into labor, I was terrified. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever imagined, but there was also a strange calmness inside me, like I'd already survived the hardest part. Hours later, when I heard that first cry, I felt everything all at once: relief, joy, sorrow, strength. I looked down at the tiny face in my arms and whispered, "You changed everything." Where for the first few weeks it was just us. Late-night feedings, sleepless eyes, lullabies whispered into the dark. The family that had stepped in made sure I didn't want for anything, but they also gave me space to be a mother on my own terms. They let me make mistakes, learn, cry, laugh. I used to imagine what it would feel like to bring my baby home to my parents, to have them hold their grandchild. I pictured my mom's soft hands, my dad's proud smile, but those images faded as I realized something powerful. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation, sometimes it's acceptance. Months passed, my parents never called. I stopped waiting for them to. I stopped checking my phone hoping for an apology that would never come. Instead, I focused on what was real, the tiny heartbeat that once fluttered inside me now sleeping in my arms. I learned that abandonment doesn't define you unless you let it. I learned that family isn't always who shares your name, but who shares your pain and chooses to love you anyway. I learned that kindness can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones who raised you, but the ones who saw your worth when others turned away. As my child grew, so did I each day. I felt pieces of the old me falling away, the girl who begged for love, who apologized for existing, who tried to earn what should have been freely given. In her place stood a woman who understood peace isn't found in being accepted by others, but in accepting yourself. There were moments when guilt tried to creep in, guilt for letting go, guilt for not chasing them, but then I'd remember the night I was told to leave, and how I walked out carrying more courage than fear. That night didn't ruin me, it revealed me. One morning, while feeding my baby, I realized something. I'd been so focused on what I lost that I hadn't seen what I gained. I gained independence. I gained strength. I gained a sense of love that didn't vanish when life got hard. And most of all, I gained a reason to live with purpose. Sometimes I still wonder if my parents ever think about us, if they regret it, if they ever replay that moment in their heads. But even if they do, it doesn't change who I am now. I used to crave their approval like oxygen. Now I just wish them peace from afar. There's a part of healing that no one talks about. The quiet forgiveness that happens when you stop needing people to understand the pain they caused. I stopped rehearsing the conversations I'd never have. I stopped writing letters in my head. I started living. The life I have now isn't perfect, but it's real. It's built on gratitude, not resentment. It's built on lessons learned the hard way and love earned through grace, not guilt. Every time I look at my child, I'm reminded that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that ever will. My parents' rejection forced me to become someone I never would have become if they'd stayed. It pushed me into a version of myself that knows her worth, that doesn't chase people, that builds peace where chaos once lived. And when people ask me how I survived being disowned while pregnant, I tell them this. I stopped expecting love from the people who couldn't give it. I stopped seeking apologies from hearts too small to offer them. I started loving myself the way I once begged others to. There's freedom in that. The kind that money can't buy, the kind that even time can't erase. Sometimes when I walk outside with my baby in the stroller, feeling the sunlight on our faces, I think about that girl packing her bags at 5 months pregnant, terrified and alone. I wish I could tell her, "You're not being abandoned, you're being redirected." Because that's what it was. A redirection, a painful, necessary, sacred shift. The universe took away what was fake so it could make room for what was real. Now I live in gratitude, for the people who saw me when I was invisible. For the warmth I found in the coldest season of my life. For the family I built, not the one I lost. Healing began when I stopped trying to understand how they could leave me, and started thanking life for who stayed. When I stopped looking back at the door that closed, and started noticing the light pouring through the one that opened. When I stopped chasing justice from people incapable of love, and started finding peace in my own survival. Healing began when I stopped seeking love from where it died and started building it where it was born anew. For the longest time, I couldn't understand why I kept trying to resurrect something that had no pulse. I kept revisiting the same memories, replaying the same moments, hoping that somehow if I looked at them long enough, they'd start to make sense. But love that dies in neglect doesn't return through reflection, It just haunts you until you learn to let it rest. In the beginning, I used to wake up with that ache. The one that lives in your chest when you miss people who are still alive but gone from you in every way that matters. I'd grab my phone, scrolling through old texts from my parents, messages that once meant everything. Birthdays, reminders to eat, casual check-ins. The kind of love that looks effortless until it disappears. I thought if I just reached out one more time, if I just said the right words, maybe they'd remember who I was before disappointment changed their view of me. But every attempt at connection was like knocking on a door that had long been locked from the inside. I thought love could be reasoned with. I thought if I explained enough, cried enough, proved enough, I could earn it back. But the truth is, love that has conditions isn't love, it's performance. And I had spent too many years auditioning for a role that wasn't meant to exist anymore. I remember one night, sitting by the window, my baby asleep beside me, city lights glowing faintly in the distance. It was raining softly, and the sound was almost comforting. I whispered into the quiet, why wasn't I enough? The question hung there, unanswered, until I realized the problem wasn't me. It was the way I had been trained to chase validation from people who could never give it freely. For months, I carried guilt like a second heartbeat. I blamed myself for being disowned, for being a disappointment, for daring to love and build a life outside the image my parents had crafted. I tried to see things from their side, convincing myself maybe they were just hurt, confused, protecting me in some twisted way. But no matter how much I rationalized it, the outcome remained the same. They left when I needed them most. Healing didn't begin with forgiveness. It began with acknowledgement. The moment I stopped minimizing what they did. The moment I admitted to myself that abandonment wasn't love, that control wasn't care, and that silence wasn't protection. I had to strip away every excuse I'd built to shield myself from the truth. Only then did I start to breathe again. There's something strange about rebuilding yourself while holding a newborn. You start to see the world through new eyes. Tiny, innocent, untouched by rejection. My child didn't know about betrayal or pride or family politics. They just knew warmth, comfort, safety. And every time they looked up at me, I realized I had the chance to rewrite what love looked like. I started small. I made promises to myself that I intended to keep. To never beg for love. To never mistake silence for peace. To never carry guilt that didn't belong to me. And as I kept those promises, something inside me shifted. I stopped flinching when my phone didn't ring. I stopped checking for their names in my inbox. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. Love, I realized, doesn't die because it stops existing. It dies because it stops being nurtured. And if I kept watering the grave of what once was, I'd never have the energy to grow something new. So I began redirecting that energy toward what was alive, myself, my child, the moments in front of me. Every time I changed a diaper, every time I sang a lullaby, every time I held my baby close and whispered, "I've got you." I was teaching myself what love truly means. Love isn't loud or dramatic or dependent on being deserved. It's steady, consistent, patient. It's the quiet strength that shows up even when no one else does. There were still moments when the past tried to call me back, when old memories crept in like ghosts, whispering doubts into my ear. But the difference was, I stopped answering. I stopped reopening wounds just to see if they still hurt. I started to understand that sometimes peace comes not from closure, but from acceptance. I remember walking past a family at the park one afternoon. The mother was laughing with her daughter, the kind of easy, unforced laughter that used to make me ache. But that day, something was different. Instead of feeling envy, I felt peace. Because I realized I had that, too. Just in a different form. I didn't need to recreate the love I lost, I needed to honor the love I was building. It's easy to romanticize reconciliation. To believe that one day the people who hurt you will wake up and realize what they've done. But I learned that waiting for that moment only delays your own healing. Sometimes the apology you deserve has to come from yourself. From forgiving yourself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for loving people who couldn't meet you where you stood. There's power in walking away from the grave of dead love and deciding to plant a garden instead. That's what I did, slowly, quietly, intentionally. I built love from the ground up. Love rooted in honesty, nurtured by kindness, watered by self-respect. And little by little life began to bloom again. Some days I still hear echoes of my parents' voices in my head. The criticism, the disappointment, the judgment. But their words no longer define me. They're just noise. Background static to a song that finally sounds like me. I started to find pieces of love in unexpected places. In the smile of a nurse who stayed past her shift to check on me. In the laughter of a stranger who helped carry my groceries. In the quiet moments of exhaustion when I looked in the mirror and saw not failure, but resilience. Love wasn't gone, it had just changed form. When I stopped chasing love from those who withheld it, I found it waiting everywhere else. It lived in the people who offered kindness without question. It lived in the small acts of care that asked for nothing in return. It lived in the way I learned to speak gently to myself, even on the hard days. For a while I thought healing meant moving on, but I realized it's not about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. Remembering without bitterness. Remembering without longing. Remembering and being grateful that you survived. There were nights I sat with my baby asleep on my chest, and I'd whisper thank you to the universe. Not because I was glad for what I went through, but because I was grateful for where it led me. Pain stripped me of illusions. It forced me to rebuild love on solid ground. I learned that I could be both soft and strong. That I could carry grief and gratitude in the same heart. That I could love people who hurt me and still walk away from them. That I didn't have to keep setting myself on fire to keep others warm. Every act of self-love felt foreign at first. Eating well, sleeping when I could, saying no, setting boundaries, but over time these small choices became a declaration. I deserve peace. I deserve respect. I deserve love that doesn't make me question my worth. The more I poured into myself, the less I needed from others. I stopped begging for crumbs when I was capable of baking my own bread. I stopped confusing attention with affection. I stopped believing that being loved required being perfect. One afternoon I was rocking my baby to sleep, humming softly when it hit me. I had become the kind of love I'd always wanted. Safe, nurturing, unconditional. I realized that the love I'd been chasing from my parents was never truly about them. It was about the part of me that didn't believe she was worthy of being loved without performing for it. I had spent years trying to be the version of myself I thought they would finally accept. The obedient daughter, the peacemaker, the achiever. But none of it ever filled the void because the void wasn't mine to fill. It was theirs. When I stopped seeking love from where it died, I stopped giving people the power to define my value. I started defining it myself. I started loving myself in the same way I loved my child, with patience, tenderness, and forgiveness. Healing wasn't loud, it didn't happen all at once, it came quietly, in ordinary moments. The first time I laughed without guilt, the first time I didn't flinch when someone said, family. The first time I looked at my reflection and didn't see brokenness. I used to think survival was enough. But now I know that surviving is just the beginning. Healing is choosing joy when bitterness would be easier. Healing is looking at your scars and seeing stories of strength instead of shame. Healing is refusing to chase love that hurts you, and building love that heals you instead. Love reborn isn't perfect. It's honest. It's messy. It's real. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't beg. It just exists, steady and unwavering. And it grows in the soil of everything you thought destroyed you. I don't hate my parents anymore. I don't even resent them. I just don't seek them. Their absence taught me more than their presence ever did. It taught me that sometimes love ends and that's okay. It taught me that you can still honor where you came from without staying stuck there. Now when I think about love, I don't think about words or promises or expectations. I think about peace. I think about waking up every day knowing I'm surrounded by warmth I built myself. I think about my child's laughter, echoing through rooms once filled with silence. And in those moments, I know that love didn't die. It transformed. It evolved into something purer, deeper, freer. Something that no one could take away again.